There we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Motion Design Hotline. I'm one of your hosts, Evan Abrams, joined, as always, with our other host, Kyle Hamrick. How you doing, Kyle?
I am good. A little tired today, actually. So if my expression seems a little worn out, that's why.
Well, please express your maladies to us. Express your humors. What are other things that you can express?
I'm working some energy into the face here, so we can have
good.
some good, vibrant expressions for everybody.
Yeah, let's all work on our independent eyebrow control, which, according to Jim Carrey, is the secret to good acting.
He's correct, 100%.
Yeah, we'll do some facial warm-ups. But today, Kyle, what we talk about, you know what we do on the show usually, let's not skip ahead.
Yeah, we're already into our nonsense.
Right, yeah, it's really, here on the program on the Motion Design Hotline, we give you wisdom about After Effects and motion design. So if you have After Effects related problems, you send them to us. We try to solve them. We try to elucidate what's going on. We try to help you express yourself with the program. And so logically today, we've come around to another expressions heavy episode. Yeah, full circle. And this is something that you and I are both pretty deep in the weeds about a lot of the time.
Yeah, we're nerds. You can say it.
Okay, yeah, we're big time nerds. We're huge dorks, and we're over here clickety clacking on our keyboards, which we celebrate here on the program. So celebrating with us, Keys, thanks for being with us. Wade holding it down. Robert, hello. Umacorn, as always. Always great to see people hanging out. And Anda who is hanging out on the YouTube. So if you're on the YouTubes, if you're on the Behance, please ask your questions in the chat. We want to help you out. If we're going too fast, if we need to clarify, you stop us, you let us know. We are here to serve. And we are going to be serving up heaping plates of JavaScript.
Yeah, I feel like they're going to be, it's more like tapas.
Yes. Small bites, high prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But together, all these little seemingly disconnected things will actually turn into what seems like a meal, but you get all these enjoyable little pieces that you could then later, enjoy as its own thing. How about that?
We would hope. Yeah.
We're going to stretch our metaphors real hard today.
Yeah, and it's so everything that we're talking about here, these are going to be a lot of building blocks. We're taking it kind of one step further. So if you've been with us and you've enjoyed some time as we talk about expressions, this is not wiggle time. We're getting beyond just basic stuff. We're going to look at some more advanced ideas to be working with, or some ways of thinking, I think, that will hopefully help you be programmatic.
And I think, just in case you haven't been with us,
right?
In super quickly here, expressions are just little bits of JavaScript code that you can enter into properties in After Effects to either augment animation that you've already done, or link properties, or animate for you sometimes. And like Evan said, we're gonna be going into more intermediate stuff here, but even if you've never touched this before, it should give you some good ideas and some things that you can then dive into further.
Yeah, and I mean, there were a few people, we talked about this on Friday. We put it over social media at EC Abrams, me, at Kylosaurus Rex, him, usually on the Fridays before the show, we say what we're going to be doing. So if you've got any follow-up questions. So there were a few. We'll see if we can touch on some of those during the program. I figure let's get into it. Let's get right into it.
Let's. You know what? One thing we should say first, though, since you kind of touched on this, if you do have questions for us, there should be a link in the description down below this video. Not my name, but
recording in progress.
Down. Yes. You can also go to motiondesignhotline.com, which is, in fact, a real website for real people. That's you and us, all of us, presumably. Yeah. And you can find old shows there to answer your questions. Maybe we already answered them, or you can ask us on our lovely form in a very detailed fashion.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's jump into one such example right now.
Take us there, Evan. I'm ready.
Now we go there live. So one use case that people bring to our attention is, what if I have a template? What if I have something with colors and I need to give the option to allow people to change those colors? right? But usually how you do that, we would go window. We are going to get up our essential graphics. You're going to find anything that has a color. So anything what with colors on them, you can just grab that color and you can drag it up into your essential graphics. Now someone can alter this color to be whatever color they want. They can just pick it. If you are in a brand situation, that might not always be ideal on account of...
Sometimes you don't want people to actually choose colors. You just...
Yes, these colors are not choices. These are more of...
You get A or B.
Yeah, tight rails. Well, especially when we're thinking about making templates, we are offloading mental labor. And if you're still asking someone to do, let's see, in the case of this, if they still to do 1, 2, 3 clicks to dial in the color the way they wanted, we're not really saving as much.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what if we just had colorways and we could pick between them? So RGB, motion design hotline colors, gray tone colors. These are kind of just random stuff. So that's what I'm going to show you how to build here real quick. So we need to bring out a drop-down menu control. You can find that over here in the drop-down, all one word, menu control, 2 other words. And just put that on any old layer. It doesn't really matter. And you can then edit what the drop-down menu items are. Critically, these have numbers. So they have names, they have numbers. You write them in. This is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. So that is the number, that is the value that has. Whenever we're thinking about expressions, we want to think about values, right? Mm-hmm. All things in After Effects are made of properties. All properties are defined by values. Values change over time. How do we hold those? Well, if you were to pick one of these, now you are simply, this is number 1, that's number 2, that's number 3. So far, so good, right? This is lining up, right, Kyle?
Mm-hmm. It is for me.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully that makes sense. How are we going to now make use of that? Well, I've got on this Ctrl layer a bunch of colors. And you could just define them like we have a primary, a secondary, and a background color. We could make primary A, primary B, primary C. We could make secondary 1, secondary 2, secondary C, whatever. If you wanted to fill out your colors that way. Personally, I think that is adding a little bit more complexity than we really want because you're ending up with 9 different boxes. That's not helpful. So I've just put keyframes on them. So if I just go ahead and I disable these expressions here real quick, you can see what that sort of means, that we're keyframing between the colors. But the data is simply being stored right here in these keys. These keys are holding values. And if you just go through, set a bunch of keyframes, there you go. You've added values that live at a certain time. So what this drop-down menu is doing is just saying which key we are interested in looking at. So there's not much code to it, right? And I even spelled it wrong. So it doesn't, or syntactized it wrong? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll make up a word that can be, the word.
Yeah.
And then it's right or wrong because we made it up.
Yeah, scintillating syntax here at the symposium. And so here I've just established a variable named M, and I'm just looking at the effect colorway menu dot value. That means I'm taking the number 1, number 2, number 3 out of that. And then I'm just saying, return to me key, and which key. Anytime you see parentheses, it's an argument. Arguments define relationships. When you have an argument in a relationship, you're about to define the terms of it. And that's how you remember what this does. So specifically, I'm looking at key number M. So the key of M. And in that case, that means the number here is going to change 1, 2, 3. Would you look at that? I got 3 keys. 1, 2, 3. There are no 0th keys. There are no 0th menu items. It lines up perfectly. So that means
although I will take a second and say that a lot of times when you're counting things in After Effects, these indexes do start at 0. So you just got to kind of go with it.
Yeah. And Kyle, you're getting some notes on your lovely baritone voice here.
Oh,
so.
yeah. I think I'm a little extra bassy today. So glad you like it.
Yeah. So here we've got basically we're just using this menu to change what the colors of these color pickers will display. If we did it wrong, if say red is not good, I can just double click here on the red and I'll just change it to a different color. Boop. It's that easy. So it's a simple thing to be able to then alter these values and to reference the values. It's a little bit, they're all stored on the same spot. So primary, secondary, background. There's not a lot of confusion. You're not going to get your wires crossed as much. And you can use this key of number for all manner of things. This could be stored positional values. This could be stored scale values. This could be any value can be stored in a key, and we can reference it and choose which key in a number of ways. The drop-down menu is just an easy one that, importantly, does not interpolate between. More on interpolation later, but it can only be 1, 2, or 3 in this case. If we added more, it could be more, but it's never going to be 2.5. It's never going to be 3.25. It's never going to be -1, right? It's only ever going to be one of these 3. Here's 3 keys.
Always hold keyframes if that sticks in your brain better.
Yeah, exactly. It's constantly holding on those values. And so how do we then reference them? Well, those are pretty easy. You just pick whip to the primary and secondary colors. So in your design, you just think about what things are primary, what things are secondary, what things are tertiary. If you had other colorways, it could be inverted. It could be inverted is what I meant to make come out of my mouth. And you could have different colorways. You could have dark mode, light mode. The world's your oyster. So that is your kind of introduction to oyster the key. Yeah. So so that's your kind of introduction to the key concept. You can use key for all sorts of stuff, but it's a great way to store a value and then point to the value later using an expression. And those keys, they could be anywhere. You could be pointing to this property and its keys, or that property and those keys, or my property and my keys. But there you go. That's how you get at these keys with ease. With that, we're going to turn over to Kyle. Kyle, what do you got for us?
Really putting me in the squeeze now.
If you please.
Oh, geez. We Kyle, wholeheartedly apologize for all of this. Yeah.
I can't believe how that
numbers are just going down. Okay, so if that was a little too codey for you, I think this might be a little more accessible to some folks, and especially if you've dabbled in expressions a little bit. I feel like this is just kind of taking things just a step further. Even if you never have, I think this will be something that you'll dig. So I'm going to show you this little example first. I'm a big fan of making what I'm going to call a progressive offset rig, where you have one thing and then maybe, 5 to 10 copies or similar things that maybe follow that, or they sort of blend into another thing. I'll kind of stop this partway through here, and you'll see how in this example, we have a line of shapes that are all following this big circle, right? And as they sort of go down the line, they not only change color bit by bit, but they're also changing shape. And so you can see that they're all following that circle with a little bit of a delay, right? But if you were to look closely, you'd actually notice that this delay is changing over time. So, something like this, if you just wanted a bunch of this circle, you could do that with the echo effect, right? No big deal. But if you want...
Before you're too far down the road, I think we are having, Wade says there's a playback keyframe. Let's go into Zoom and let's make sure that we just go to the other
give you the
option.
Optimized. Yep.
Or de-optimized, whichever one it prefers.
Yeah.
We don't know.
I'll optimize you here and we'll see how that works. Okay. So I can't see you now, and I'll figure that out in a minute. Zoom helpfully hides itself all the time. Love it. Yeah. My favorite thing ever. But you just tell me if this works any better. Here we go. I'll let this play one time, and then I'm going to kind of go back to where it's frozen anyway.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, Wade says it looks
Worse?
great. Look, no, it says it looks great on Instagram. Maybe it's a playback. Anyway, Wade,
Yep.
keep us apprised. He says better. We're going to proceed.
Well, this is a little meta here.
I know. Well,
Being
the other thing, look, full disclosure, folks, Zoom is one of the things we run on the back end to get Kyle and I in the same show at the same time. And sometimes optimizing for video will make it smooth. Sometimes it will make it bad. So, yeah. All right, Kyle.
It's a roll of the dice as to which one will work.
Unpause. Boop.
As I was saying, so, if you just wanted a bunch of circles, you can just use the echo effect or like make some copies and offset them. But I like being able to control this sort of thing, right? So what we're going to be using, this whole rig has a bunch of expressions in it because that's how I be. What if, Kyle, this. But I'm mostly leveraging a thing called value at time, okay? And so what we're doing is essentially linking two properties, but then you're telling it, I want you to look at that property, but not now, at some slightly different time, which gives you a lot of power. So let's kind of explore the setup a little bit. You'll see I already have some keyframes on this blue circle here. It's a mighty movement back and forth. There you go. And if I wanted to link this little pink square to this, obviously I could just parent it. And if I just did that, now it's going to, go along for the ride that way. That's not quite what I want. I could, of course, shift parent it, which will snap it to that position. Let's just stick it on top so we can see it. And so, okay, great. It's going along for the ride, but I don't have any control now really. But again, not what I want. Let's go ahead and undo that and just kind of move this follower back over here. Instead, what I want to do is link up these position properties, but I don't want to just link it because again, that's going to say, well, you're always going to be here. And that's what's happening right now. So I could open this up and even just with this exact link that I just created right there, just link it here or link it here. It's going to get the same code. It's just saying, look at that other layer called leader and grab the position. I could type in dot value at time. Make sure that you capitalize the A and the T. That's how it works. And then in these parentheses, let's just say time -1, okay? Just to kind of see what it does. So now what we're going to get is that value -1. One what? Well, expressions think in seconds. So it's -1 second. So in this case, like you might not think a second is a long time until you're animating it. And then boy, that's forever, huh? So we need to start thinking in like fractions of seconds. So we could say, okay.
That's 24 individual beautiful things, Kyle.
Yeah, exactly. In this case, yes, 24. So instead I could say, well, time minus, I don't know, 0.2. And now I'm just kind of guessing like, okay, that's probably more like what I want. And so you got this lovely little offset here with the thing kind of following with a little offset, and that's okay. And I could make, let's go ahead and just put a number on this. I'll call this follower 1, make a duplicate, and then I could open up this one and say, okay, well, if that one's minus 0.2, we could say this one's 0.4. And so now we're going to start getting, all right, this is pretty neat, right? But already you can see how sort of annoying this is to update. And if I wanted to make, say, 20 of these, like I'm going to have to individually open up each of these expressions and do the math. And then heaven forbid, if I decide that I want the delay to be a little different, I think we see the problem here, right? So let's take a second and think about being modular. Evan, like I said, feel free to kind of cut me off when you feel like it's a good time to jump back to your stuff.
Okay, will do.
Yeah. So we are going to, instead of putting a value here, we have a couple problems to solve. The first problem is making this more modular, easy to control, which looky here, I already put a slider control on this null layer that I called controls. I already have this set up. You people know how this works, I'm sure. So I'm just going to call this delay frames. Okay, well, how about for now, since I haven't talked about this next part, we'll just call this delay. All right. And then we'll set that to 0.2 because that's what we came up with. And so now we could say time minus whatever that is. All right. So now we've got this thing is always going to be offset by however much this number is. And so I could easily start changing that. And if I want to make duplicates, that'll work just fine, right? Well, they're both linked to the same thing. So now we have to figure out a way to offset them, right? The best way to offset things in After Effects is, of course, what, Evan?
Oh, I was trying to make a pun about upsetting them. Oh,
well, I caught you at the I caught you at the right value at time. So we already talked.
In this case, 0.
0. We already talked a little bit about an index, right? And how pretty much everything in After Effects has sort of a number attached to it. And so we can start using that as the thing to tell it. Because really what we want, right, is we want to think about like, well, if follower 1 is going to use whatever that number is, we want follower 2 to use that number twice and follower 3 to use that number 3 times. Okay. So we could totally do that because every layer has a little number right here. See, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in this composition, and that is the layers index. And so that's one way you could offset this. But this code is already getting kind of long and messy to read, right? So how about we break this down a little bit? Let's create a variable called, leader position, okay? And I'm going to make sort of obscenely long variables because that way they're clearer for you. So
you can name them whatever you want. Like
you can
name, yeah. And
you can name them Scott,
yeah,
as long as you're consistent with plugging them back in later.
And as long as they don't overlap with words that are already used by the
other
language
things
in some way.
If you start typing in what you want a variable to be named and it auto-completes, that means that's a thing that already exists. Yeah. And you should probably use something different.
And if it turns a special color, then you definitely know.
Yes. So I've created this thing, a variable called leader position, and that is the position of that other layer. Okay. And then I'll create a variable that I'm going to call delay. How about delay amount? All right. And that equals that slider up there, semicolon. And so let's get rid of some of this stuff. And so then our actual thing that we want to do is we want to say, well, look at that leader position. And then we're going to do the value at time on the end of that. And then we want to say time minus that delay amount. Okay. So right now, all we've done is accomplished the exact same thing that I had written, but now it's a little more modular, right? So we need to add one more piece into here, which is that offset amount. So let's create another variable called offset amount. All right. Yep. Delay amount, offset amount. And that's just going to be index in this case. That means the index of this layer. So we could say that we want to offset, you know what? Let's put that right above the delay amount. And the delay amount's going to be that delay amount times our offset amount. Okay. Does that make sense? Hopefully I'm talking to myself.
Yeah.
And so now when we plug this in here, it's going to be multiplied by whatever the layer's index is. So in this case, that's a lot. But if I move this up to the top, now this layer's index is 1, and we're going to get the exact same result that we had. Okay, I set this to 0.5. Let's turn that back down to 0.2. So now we'll get, okay, there we go. And if I start duplicating this, every one of these is going to be offset by a little bit more. And so we're starting to get this really nice, cool, progressive offset rig here with everyone doing its own thing, offset by each one. However, there is one inherent flaw in this approach, and it's that now I can't put anything above these layers, and I can't rearrange these layers without them recalculating what they're supposed to do, right? Because if I were to put these up here, everything just changed, because now all their things are, their index is just changed by 2, and so the numbers are wrong.
Yeah, and before you're too far down the road,
Yeah.
so Umacorn's saying they get a lot of this project contains an expression error stuff. Would you mind breaking one of those and just seeing if we can help people track it down?
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to right here, I'm going to call this delay amount. Okay. So I just broke that expression because there is no variable called delay account. And so if you break an expression, I may have disabled my little orange flag at some point in the past, which I recommend you not do.
Right.
When you break an expression, you should get an orange bar right here. I'll need to go into my preferences and sort of tell it like, yes, it's okay to show me this. But you should also get this little flag right here by your expression. And when you click on that, you should get a little pop-up here. I feel like we are, again, sort of value at time delayed on my screen a little bit, but that's okay. You click on that little flag, it should typically tell you, at the very least, it's going to tell you which line it's in, even if the rest of what it says isn't particularly meaningful or helpful to you. But in this case, it's going to say, so there's an error at line 5 and delay amount is not defined. Basically, you didn't tell me anything that matches that name. So that's a good hint, like, okay, maybe I made a typo, which is usually the issue most times. The other, I mean, realistically, sometimes if you're just typing gibberish into this and you don't know what you're doing, like, you're probably going to make some errors. And there's only so much I can do to help you with that. Currently,
but at least you can find where the problem is.
Right.
It's kind of.
And there's one big thing I want to show people because this comes up a lot. If you go up to File, Project Settings, and then in here, you have a tab for expressions. You want to make sure that you are on the JavaScript engine and not the legacy extend script engine. This actually changed in 2018, but there's a this setting is sticky. And if you open an old project that existed before this engine changed, sometimes this will stick, and then you create a new project and that will then be created in the extend script, and you start typing some new thing that didn't exist in the old one, and After Effects says that doesn't exist, and you're like, but I know it does. This is the solution. So remember to always check that, please.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I know someone on Twitter, they asked about like, well, what about getting like AI to write our scripts, our expressions for you? Right? Now, one of the troubles, and you and I have both had this experience where people are like, I copy and pasted this from the internet, why isn't it working? Right? Well, that's because you sort of need to be able to fix the thing. Like, you have to be at a level to fix the thing. So if you're asking for something that's very complex and it doesn't work, I always give the example of, it's like asking your drunken uncle to fix your plumbing. You need to know more about plumbing than your drunken uncle does so that they don't put water all over your house, right? If you can't check the pipes before you turn the water on, you're going to get an error of some form, right? And then you have to track down the error. And anyway, all of that to say, the error wants to tell you what's wrong. That language itself is something that you have to sort of investigate.
Learn how to interpret, Yeah,
because it's like trying to speak a language to an incredibly unhelpful person. You know, you show up in a restaurant, you try to ask where the bathroom is, they say, we don't have a word for bathroom, get out, right? Like, or if people have gone to Europe, you've had this experience, right? Where is the bathroom? You want to take a bath in my restaurant? Sorry. I know you call it a water closet. I know you call it the toilets. We do not call it that. we are you do not need to make the laugh at the people because they're using the wrong word. Language snobs, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you as someone who is able to understand everyone who makes the attempt and figure it out, right?
Although when we're talking expressions, we do kind of need to be language snobs because you need to be precise with your language because it's code and that's how it be.
Yes. After Effects will not give you the grace of understanding. It will not happen. All right. Anyway, continue your thought. I want to see the ending of this, and then we'll.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'm coming in for a landing on this segment of it here.
Okay.
I'm going to put a pin in that index issue. Okay, but understand that that's one thing that we need to think about. Okay, because there's a solve for that. What we made works, but it's just not flexible. And there's another thing here that works but isn't flexible, and that's having to do our offset in these weird decimals that I'm kind of just making up, right?
Yeah.
Because as an animator, I want to figure out my offset in frames instead of 0.2 seconds and then start guessing like 0.213, like you're just making stuff up, right? But if you want to find frames, there is an expressions way to do this, but there's also just a thinking way to do this, which is to think about how many frames you want it to be offset and then just divide that by the frame rate of your composition. So I'm just going to, this will come into play later, so I'll get rid of that. I'm going to duplicate this slider right here, and I'm going to say frames, okay? I'm going to name that, and let's name this let's change this to 3 frames. And in our delay, I'm actually going to change that from its own number to being, let's create a little expression in here with an alt click. I'm going to say that thing divided by, and I'm working in 24 frames per second. So I'll just type in 24. And so now, turns out 3 frames is actually 0.12. And so if I wanted to say 5 frames, well, that's 0.21. And so all you have to do, even without some of the other expression-y ways to get this, just sort of use a little bit of logic to think about the offset that you're looking for and what that means in the context of your composition. And so now this thing's always going to be 2 frames behind its leader here, right? And again, if we created some more, they would all be offset accordingly because I made this code modular in a way where it's going to be offset. Each one is going to generate its own sort of new multiple of this thing. We just want to be a little more flexible with it, but that's my teaser, and we'll come back to that part.
Yeah. Speaking of flexible, so within one of the other questions that we get is often what if a layer had 2 parents? So within After Effects, you have a parent and link zone here, which means you link one layer and it holds the parent's hand in the mall, and then it goes everywhere that parent goes, right? Because in After Effects, all children are good children, and they always do what their parents tell them all the time.
Yes, of course.
That's, yeah, as rigid as After Effects is with language, it's even more strict when it comes to parenting. So what if we wanted the child to obey this parent sometimes and that parent at other moments? Mommy says I can't have candy, but what if I ask daddy? So
as an actual parent, no comment.
Yeah. You can tell Kyle is a parent, but Evan is childless. So in this instance, we've got 2 things going on. We've got the yellow ball and the pink ball. And those are just A and B right here. Those are rotating around because they're parented to nulls, and those are spinning them around. So let's not look at C for a minute. So this is what they are doing. And I put a little echo on them so you can kind of see the trails that they're making, which is helpful.
How nice of you.
I know. I'm trying to be helpful, man. I'm trying here.
You could have built a rig with 20 layers for each of those and value at time. That would have been great to watch, right?
Could have done it. Could have done it. And now I've got orbiter C, which I want to sometimes be with A, sometimes be with B. Sometimes you go to A, sometimes you go to B. So how do we make that happen? Well, let's get into here. And it all hinges on this idea of position. So step 1, whenever you are thinking expressionally, you want to think programmatically, you want to just bring in all the stuff. Like the 2 things I know to be inputs are, in my case, a P1 and a P2, I've called them. And that is the position of layer A, the position of layer B. Those are the 2 things I care about. So I bring those in, and I know at the end of the day, the result is going to be a position. So I don't really have to convert anything. I don't have to change one thing to another. So we should be fine. And then another variable is I want to control how much it's listening to one parent or the other parent. So pretty critically, how, we need a slider, right? And you find in the expressions controls slider, this will get you a numerical input between 2 things. And there you go. And so when it's at 0%, be here. When it's 100%, be there. Whoa, hold on. What does that sound? What does that sound like? That sounds like we're describing an interpolation between something. I'm going to take 0 to 100, and that's going to mean something else. So that brings us to the final line, the final way of thinking here. I would like a linear relationship remapping that value of the slider, in this case, B. I don't remember why I called it B. I'm sure blending, maybe that's what I meant.
Sure.
And its value will run from 0 to 100, the minimum range to the maximum range that I'm willing to accept. And then when it's at 0, BP1. When it's at 100, BP2. It's not particularly complex. The shift that you sort of need to make is in thinking about, these are my inputs. What am I going to do with them? Oh, that reminds me of this, right? Now, if you don't know that linear ease out, ease in exist, obviously that's not going to jog anything for your memory. So this is let's say a vocabulary building time.
Yeah.
When we are now going to learn the useful word of linear, and that linear can help you. It gives you the possibility to remap from one thing to another thing. We have used position, in this case, a 2-part object inside of the braces, whatever, the square brackets. And what goes on inside of here is it could be anything. So this is a position, but it could be from one scalar property to another. It could be from one 3-parter to another 3-parter. It could be from a color to a color. It could be from a rotation to a rotation. Right? Those are the easiest ones because they map 1-to-1. If one part has 2 parts and the other part does not, that might be confusing and weird. Try this out, see what you think. And all we're doing is crossfading between the two by just racking this slider kind of back and forth, and we get this trail. Now, why would we use this, right? Why would I ever want to blend between 2 parents? Well, because you are now able to have an object be attached to one and then take on the properties of another. So think about a ball being thrown. Think about 2 boats docking with each other. Anytime it needs to go from one to another. And if you want to behave exactly like parenting, then you would just append the word value to this. So if we call up that position. So right now it's behaving sort of exactly. It's going exactly to where it needs to go. Well, I could just say value plus. And now we will take into account where I have positioned this thing already, and then it will take on the position, the relative positioning of the stuff, pretty much exactly the way parenting works. Kyle, I'm a parenting expert already. I'm going to go to Instagram and give some advice. Is there anything I was missing in the chat that was
Joel asked a good question, and I think it's a little different use of linear, which we have talked about in the past in other episodes. But Joel was asking, how can you do an overshoot with a linear expression, which is a good thought because you're essentially establishing a range, a maximum, a minimum range of both input and output. And so what I would typically do is instead of overthinking the problem, just like, okay, well, let's think about what we have to work with. And instead of trying to do some wacky code solution to make this much more complicated, just say, okay, well, if my range is 0 to 100, for example, just make 90 the thing you're actually going to stop at. And so then you actually use 100 as your overshoot and then land on 90.
Yeah, because any value below the minimum or above the maximum is going to be capped to those. Yep. Now, that's an interesting thing. So I'm often using linear just on values, right? So I will instead, I will add a multiplier to it. If it's multiplied by 1, it's exactly what it is. But if it's multiplied by 1.1, right, it's going to be more. So I then sort of have 2 things that I'm and again,
these are pieces. So once you kind of understand, just like using language, like once you understand words and phrases, you can mix and match them to suit your needs. And then what if Kyle?
Yeah. So here's the other thing to think about. We're using linear, but we could also use an ease. We could use an ease in. We can use an ease out. We can do an ease, and then we can ease that ease. Like you can double them up if you want a more exaggerated curve. And Kyle, you have the third-party flow installed, right?
I do, yes.
Okay, let's just dip to your screen real quick, and if you could pull open the code that it will poop out. This is a way of getting or hard coding, let's say like Bezier.
I don't think I have my screen up, by the way. I don't see it. There we go.
We'll turn to it when thematically appropriate.
Okay, fine. Jeez.
So here you can see, you could output this type of movement as an expression and then call that function in the same way that you would call linear or call ease or call whatever. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Okay. I think that was it for multiple parenting. I don't know if there's any other thoughts I had around that. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to get to all the examples that I got. Kyle, let's go back to you.
What a surprise. We created more material than we could possibly talk about.
But if you want to download those things, motiondesignhotline.com, get those real files made by real people for you to enjoy.
Yes. As always, today's files will go up a little bit after the show is over. So here we are back here. We need to solve our little index issue. And I will, since it came up, I don't think I'm going to get deep into this, but there, on the actual build, I did some other stuff, and I'll just kind of throw these concepts at you because I wanted my offsets to actually be a little bit variable here. And I talked about that, right? So one thing that you could do now, since one reason I really like using sliders for things like this is that now everything is not only easily findable and easily adjustable, but it means it's keyframeable. So I could actually have the delay be, say, 10 frames here, and then maybe when we get to this one, it's going to have changed to only 2 frames. And now, in this case, if I were to use hold keyframes on these, we're going to get a sudden jump, right? Because it's delayed by 10 frames, and then suddenly it's delayed by only 2, which means it has kind of vanished to somewhere we don't want it to be. So in this case, you'd want to be more animating this so that it, but now it's going to follow much more closely, right? But this just gives you a lot of control. But when I was creating my thing, I instead decided, well, I would actually like the delay to be relative to the speed of the movement of the parent. But then I used a thing called clamp, which kind of like the discussion we were just having about linear, allows you to sort of set a minimum and maximum of the values you're using, but you can kind of do that all within this thing. So it's just more control. We're not going to talk about clamp much more, I don't think, but just to kind of throw out some concepts, there's ways to take inputs and then kind of manipulate them in the way that you want. Because I found that sometimes, since I was using the speed, that was so variable here that sometimes it was a little too much delay or not enough. And so I sort of set a floor and a ceiling, like use this other thing to set your delay, but within these limits, right? All right. Pardon me for my little aside. Let's come back to this.
And this show, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm just going to kind of quickly give you the solution to this index problem because this is much more modular. And then I think for the rest of it, we'll throw back to you and you can do yours.
Okay.
Dig into my files. So instead of index, which is very inflexible, right? What if we were to, helpful me, I'm already going to name these follower 1. And when I duplicate it, After Effects is going to helpfully number those up, right? Okay. Well, what if we were taking advantage of that instead of the actual layer index? Now, granted, there's other approaches here. There's pretty much everything is actually just an index in here. But this is the one that made the most sense to me. I'm going to use this number that I've already established as my offset amount. Okay. So instead of index, what if we looked at this layer's actual name? So this layer dot name. Okay. Well, that's not quite going to do it because this layer's name is follower space 1. So we just need to actually look at that thing and then snip off the end or slice off the end, if you will. So there's another function. We can say dot slice, and then you need to tell it how much you want to slice. And I believe I want -1 here, right? I want to go to the end and then step back 1. Sound right to you? We're about to find out.
Yeah.
There we go. So what it's looking for here is this layer's name, but just the last character. And so then if I were to duplicate this, that one's going to be looking at the 2 and 3 and a 4 and a 5. And so now I have this nice progressive offset each one is multiplying whatever their number is by that offset amount that's established up here. And I can rearrange these and put them in any order I want, and it doesn't matter at all. And I can move them around anywhere in the composition. And then you could start using that exact same logic to do other things like, well, if I want the last one to be yellow and the first one to be pink, you just have to think about, okay, well, if I have, say, 5 of them, I could have each of them maybe like make a second fill color and have the opacity of that fill decrease by, in this case, 20% times whatever my number is. And now the first one will be 100%, the first one will be 80%, etc. So once you kind of apply the logic of these offsets, you can do all kinds of things with them that make it very easy to control. And just to kind of look at some of the controls that I set up in my actual usable composition here, which again, you can play with. I used a point control, which is another expression controls menu thing. Just has 2 values in one control. So that's a great place to set something like some boundaries, right? Because you have both numbers in one place.
Right.
I created a controller that I'm calling speedometer, and that's just reading the speed of that other thing so that I can see it. There's nothing wrong with creating a bunch of controls so you can kind of see each step if that's helpful for you, or even taking text layers and having them be one of your outputs by creating things like, well, look at that frame delay and divide that by 24. So that'll tell you like what your offset is, for example, okay? You can just plug that into the source text. So think about like giving yourself these sort of step-by-step places to see what's being generated. And then that also makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot when something breaks, because you can kind of see each step and see how far it's working and then follow up with what you need to do.
Yeah. And it can be really, it's like a black box, right? We only see the output.
Yeah.
So that's going to be super confusing. One question. What if you have more than 10 followers? I think it works for 11, 12, 13, etc. If you got into triple digits, then
right,
you're getting into we need to slice a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. You would just need to adjust that number in your slice to account for more digits if you're doing that.
And then what is it? There's slice, split, 2 fixed. There's a bunch of string chopping and moving around of
and rounding and 2 floor. Again, these are ways to further control what's happening with the numbers that you've created in an expression.
Hey, speaking of numbers.
Oh, wow. Look at that segue.
All right. So we're going to talk about a piece of math that people probably do not use because it is not something that we talk about in schools.
It's scary.
Well, yeah. If you've ever had to do maths, and we're talking addition, multiplication, subtraction. There's others, but I'm not good at math, so it'll surprise people to learn Evan is bad at math. I'm bad at arithmetic. We'll say I was really thankful. We'll go on a small tangent. I was really thankful that in my high school experience, I had a teacher who really explained that math is not just adding and subtracting things. That's arithmetic. They can train a horse to do that at the zoo, right? There's not much going on there. Not to be derogatory about arithmetic. If you do arithmetic very fast, congratulations. That is great.
Or overly congratulatory to smart horses, I guess.
I know, but
yeah.
But arithmetic, is not math. Math, in a pure math sense, is understanding relationships that are in the universe. He described math in a very stoned way as being the secret language of the universe. And to my mind, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Hold on. So anyway, that's a much more kind of, philosophical way of thinking about that type of thing. But just to say, math is just language. We're just using it to express relationships between stuff. So let's not get too freaked out.
Joel is using his language to accurately guess one of the things you're using here.
Yeah. So we are going to be using division, but we're going to be using the remainder after division in order to produce this clicky clock. So this is spinning thing that spins. But hey, wait a minute, I don't see a lot of rotating going on. What's happening here? Well, these are, if I may just simply expose one of them, let's have a look at the old ones digit here, and we'll go to none so you can see the mask. I'll take the mask off and you can see what's really happening. So we've got 901, blah, 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 back all the way down to 890, all in a line, right? Just like you would in a real clock. No. If this were a dial, it would wrap all the way around to be a cylinder, right? But in this case, it's just a line because this is a fun, flat way to kind of abstractly make this happen. And I'm just using some data over here, this numbo, which is just keyframing up to 99 and then to 100 and then clicking its way up to 1,000. So how will that be represented? Well, we're going to bring in that slider. Thing one, we did it. We've done this so many times. But the result I want is that number, in this case divided by 10, and then, modulus 10, and different from dividing. If you divide the number, you get the number of times that thing went into that other thing. If you modulus that number, so that number modulo 10 is saying, divide that by 10, but I'm only interested in what's left over. The number of clean divisions, I don't care, but everything that's left over, tell me what that number is. I then multiply that by -80, which I know to be the amount of distance I need to push this layer so I get to the next number. I know that because here is my spacing right there.
Smart boy.
Thank you. And I've done a little bit of offsetting here with the superscript in order to get things exactly where I want them. But I'm using the animator, the text animator here, so it's sliding the position so the mask stays where I want it and this slides behind. Now, modulus 10 times -80. That means that as soon when right now we are at 0. Okay, perfectly good. Okay, now we're going to keep going forward. We're going forward a little bit more. Okay, it keeps going. What's going to happen? What's going to happen when we get to 11? Kabam! We're going to go right back to the beginning, right? Because the remainder is we're just counting up again and again and again. So if you want to do something that happens every 3 times, something that happens every 4 times, like modulo is going to be taking care of that. Right, we do it normal, and then we flip it back around, back to 0 every time we hit the new one. So
I think I'm gonna change the name of that thing from what it is to modulo. Yeah.
Oh, there's a song that's like, I don't think people know who Said the Whale is. Camilo the Magician. You know what? Don't correct me if I got the band wrong. Modulo, I want to see where you made that number go. Never mind. It doesn't matter. So that's how we get this number clicking along. Clickety, click, 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 right? The tens, well, how would you modify that to get the tens, right? Well, the number that I'm inputting, let's just divide that by 10, modulo that, and multiply that by -80. Now, I also want I want to make a little bit of a change to this, that I'm using that value at time that we talked about, so that this will update a little bit after the number kind of comes in, and that's what gives you this click, click, click kind of deal, right? That this one is offset and this one is offset, so you get that click, click, click. If you want to dissect these things, then please go to motiondesignhotline.com, download our files. They'll be up eventually after the show. So if you're watching this in the future, that probably already happened. But you are watching it in the present. So there are a few things that I didn't quite get to. Another way of mixing multiple sorts of parenting or sources of movement is something. So that's just with keyframes. This is what it would be like if it has a little bit of wave in it. This is if it has a little bit of randomness in it. And then we combine those things. So it's a little tease if you want to download those. I think that was the only one that I really didn't get to because we nailed the modulo thing. Kyle's whole thing, you're going to put that whole thing up there, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I'll put the whole thing and what I built. So you'll be able to kind of piece through. I think the biggest thing to be able to take away from this stuff is understanding possibilities, because
Yeah.
look, I mean, you can Google for value at time and you can Google for modulo, and you're going to find 20 years worth of forum posts and stuff like that. Some of them will be more helpful than others. But if you understand that a thing is possible and generally what you're looking for, you're probably going to be able to piece it together. And of course, if you can't, you know who to ask.
Exactly.
So...
Just like that math teacher, I want to impart to you that expressions are the secret language of the universe, and let that be your guide. I'm Evan Abrams. Find me online at EC Abrams. Find Kyle online at Kylosaurus Rex. Find us right here every Monday. Stay creative, be kind to each other, and we will see you all around the internet.
Thanks, everybody.
I hope
Expression.
we're going to find out if that